Good evening. This is the September 6th, 2023 meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kevin Ortiz, Chair of the CAC. Before we give the chair's report, I'd like to ask Elijah Saunders, our clerk this evening, to do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then he will read an announcement about public comment.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. Member Bars?
Bars present.
Bars present. Member Chen?
Chen present.
Chen present. Member Daniels?
Daniels present.
Daniels present. Member Davidson? Davidson absent. Member Kim?
Kim present.
Kim present. Member Levine?
Levine present.
Levine present. Member Ortega?
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Chair Ortiz?
Ortiz present.
Ortiz present. And Vice Chair Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Chair, we have quorum. Now for the public comment announcement. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you'll be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item, when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again, or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you'll be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any television, the radios are on. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna move on to item 2, which the chair's report. First, I'd like to welcome everyone back. I hope everyone had a great August, took vacations, and is ready to get back to business. Next, I want to give thanks to Eric Rosell, who served us as the District 6 representative, but due to redistricting, now resides in District 5. We appreciate his service and hope that he will continue to share his insightful input. It is September, and that means it is Bay Area Transit Month. We're San Francisco Transit Riders, Seamless Bay Area, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and transit operators and related agencies host a series of events to highlight the importance of transit in helping folks get to work, school, recreation, and more, as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The homepage for a ride contest and all kinds of transit-focused events can be found at sftransitriders.org/transitmonth. Caltrain is bringing their electric train tour to San Francisco on Saturday, September 23rd from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The tour will be at the SF Caltrain station located at 700 4th Street. Besides the train tour, there will be food, trucks, games, art, a photo booth, and much more. Caltrain electrification was one of the signature projects of the Prop K sales tax expenditure plan, with the Transportation Authority contributing $41 million from both sales tax and One Bay Area grant funds. More information on how to make the required RSVP given space limitations can be found on Caltrain's website on www.caltrain.com/projects/electrification/electric train tour, or to search Caltrain electric train tour. As the September 14th deadline to approve bills before the first year session nears, there's a great deal of activity in the state legislature. AB 645 Friedman, the speed safety camera pilot authorization bill, is being read a third time on the Senate floor, and if approved, will go back to the Assembly for concurrence on amendments. The most notable of the bills not moving forward this year is SB 532. The bill would have increased bridge tolls by $1.50 for 5 years to help address the transit fiscal cliff. Senator Weiner has held it back at this time to take time for additional discussion with the rest of the Bay Area delegation and other stakeholders. The bill to be taken up next year. The governor has until October 14th to sign or veto bills, so staff anticipates preparing a year-end legislative summary after that time. Lastly, before meeting management reminders, staff advises that they anticipate agendizing some Vision Zero items at the September 26th board meeting, including a quick build update, similar to what the CAC heard at its April 26, 2023 meeting, along with an update on the SFMTA's active communities plan. These items are likely to be on consent at the September 27th CAC meeting, since they will have a lengthy agenda of action items to tune in to the September 26th board meeting if you can. Meeting management. So CAC members, if you would like to speak, you can indicate so by standing your name card on its end, so it is pointing up. I ask CAC members to wait until I call on you to speak, then press the red star on the base of the microphone to turn it on. You should see a red light turn on below the mouthpiece. Please turn off the microphone when done speaking by pressing the red star again. Be sure to directly speak into the microphone so folks in the back of the room can hear you. Please limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. Presenters, please only respond to questions if requested by the chair. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. Okay, that's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Seeing none, can we move on to public comment?
Checking for public comments, and there is no public comment for,
Just one moment, Daniela, we do have an
Oh.
person.
sorry, I
for
jumped,
item 2.
sorry.
Thank you, Edward Mason. September is Rail Safety Month also, so I think even though we don't have that much rail in the city, but we do have light rail. And bottom line, don't run for them, don't run around them. And also don't trespass into the private right of way that is dedicated for rail in the city. So just like to mention that it's also Rail Safety Month. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have virtual public comment?
Daniela confirming there's no remote public comment.
Correct, there's no public comment for item 2.
Thank you very much.
Great, so we're gonna move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 and 4 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present on these items. If a CAC member wishes, any of these items may be removed and considered separately. Do any members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, can we open it up to public comment?
Do we have any remote public comment?
Checking for a remote public comment, there is no remote public comment for items 3 and 4.
May I have a motion and a second to approve item 3 and 4?
This is Member Siegel. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, thank you, Member Levine.
Okay, item 3, the minutes moved by Vice Chair Siegel, seconded by Member Levine. On that motion, Member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Chen.
Chen, aye.
Chen, aye. Member Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Davidson.
Davidson, aye.
Davidson, aye. Member Kim.
Kim, aye.
Kim, aye. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Chair Ortiz.
Ortiz, aye.
Ortiz, aye. Vice Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye on the motion to approve the minutes. Item 3 on the consent agenda. The motion is approved.
Great. So we're gonna move on to item 5, which is adopting a motion of support to release $4.6 million in previously allocated sales tax funds with conditions to the Trans Bay Joint Powers Authority for downtown rail extension engineering development and procurement preparation. Presenting was gonna be Jesse Cole from the rail program manager from SFCTA. And we'll also have some folks from TJPA as well.
Right, my sure, is this working? So it's Jesse Kaler.
Kaler,
And he's with the
apologies.
SFCTA, and we probably messed that up in the scripture, Ortiz, sorry, Jesse.
Apologies.
Great. Good evening, CAC members, Chair Ortiz, Jesse Kaler, Rail Program Manager with the Transportation Authority. We are joined this evening by colleagues from the Trans Bay Joint Powers Authority, which is the lead agency for the Downtown Rail Extension Project, now known as the Portal Project. Alfonso Rodriguez, my colleague, who is the project director for the portal, as well as Lily Magiswu, who is TJPA's Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs. So we appreciate their partnership and participation on this evening meeting. I'll be very brief on this evening's item. This is a follow-up item to an allocation that the board made in March of this year, at which time a portion of the funds were placed on reserve subject to a future action to release those after satisfying a number of conditions specified by the board. Can I just confirm that the slides are up or can be up?
I'm not sharing, sorry, thank you,
Do,
Jesse.
oh, I need to share them,
Yeah.
sir. My apologies.
And folks in the back of the room here, Jesse, all right? Yes, thank you.
There we go.
All right, that does it. So just by way of background, the portal project is a longstanding priority of San Francisco and the Bay Area to bring Caltrain and future California high-speed rail to the Salesforce Transit Center in downtown San Francisco. The project, led by the Transbay Joint Powers Authority, is a partnership of 6 agencies. And this project was fully environmentally clear to the state and federal level, including a federal record of decision in 2019. The estimated capital cost of the project is $7.5 billion, and I'll describe a bit more of the background on that figure and the funding plan momentarily. The single largest source of funding for the project is the Federal Transit Administration's New Starts Capital Investment Grant Program, and the project has been engaged with the FTA for a number of years through a very structured process to seek and confirm that funding to the project. Most recently, in February of this year, TJPA made an initial request to the FTA to advance the project into what FTA refers as the engineering phase of that grant process. And in August of this year, the TJPA board authorized an updated submittal to FTA, which allows TJPA to seek the CIG grant from the Biden-Harris administration and confirm those funds by spring of 2025. In 2020, the 6 agencies shown on this slide, including TJPA, the 2 operators, the city, and the 2 funding agencies, ourselves at MTC, entered into a memorandum of understanding intended to bring the project to ready for procurement status. We've been engaged in that work for approximately 3 years. And among the tasks in that MOU was the development of a set of recommendations with respect to governance of the project subsequent to this MOU, which expires at the end of this calendar year. The TJPA board approved the recommendations of the Transportation Authority and the MTC with respect to governance for delivery of the project last month. In March of this year, the board allocated the remaining Prop K funds for the project prior to the sunset of the Prop K program. In so doing, $4.7 million were placed on reserve, subject to future release by the board following the completion of that governance blueprint and a future presentation to the board with respect to its recommendations. In addition, there are a number of conditions on our allocation to the TJPA for the portal project, including a specific oversight protocol associated with our enhanced oversight, as well as periodic presentations to this body and the board with respect to the progress of the project. The capital cost estimate of $7.5 billion, which I mentioned just a moment ago, reflects FTA's comprehensive assessment of the project conducted earlier this year through a risk workshop, which we participated in along with partner agency staff at MTC, as well as a number of other recommendations from that process that have led to adjustments to scope and project definition. In addition, for purposes of the FTA process, FTA approved TJPA's request to reflect the previously completed train box, which sits at the basement of the Salesforce Transit Center, which represents a non-FTA investment of $729 million for an FTA reported total of $8.2 billion. That is a bit of a complicated story, but it is a positive step for the project, which allows us to seek a higher federal investment in the project, reflecting our own greater local investment, as well as to demonstrate the commitment of those previous funds as we advance under the FTA process. With respect to project funding, the FTA grant program is targeted to fund just shy of 50% of that larger $8.2 billion total, with that amount being advancing into the engineering phase of the FTA process. Currently, there is just shy of $2 billion in committed funds to the project. That includes $300 million in Prop L, as well as a number of local funding sources, which were established at the inception of the Transbay program associated with the development that you see south of Market downtown. In the coming 15 to 18 months, the project team's challenge will be to confirm the balance of funds on the project, which will require additional local, state, and federal participation. With respect to project governance for construction of the project, the governance blueprint, which was brought forward to the TJPA board last month, made a series of recommendations with respect to how the 6 agencies involved in the project will continue to collaborate to deliver the project successfully. In essence, these recommendations seek to strengthen the strong partnership between the 6 agencies that has gotten us to this point, poised to secure federal funds and move the project into construction. The blueprint's recommendations include support to the TJPA project team at every level, including the policy level at the TJPA board, the executive and management levels, and the integrated project delivery team. This is also supported by a change management process that allows for oversight and transparency among the project agencies and funding partners. Another key component of the governance recommendations is a recommendation with respect to stage gates, which show the progression of the project through its major phases and provide for an assessment of the readiness of the project to advance from pre-procurement into procurement and eventually into construction and eventually operations. With the adoption of the blueprint by the TJPA board last month, the project team is focused on a number of activities to implement its recommendations, including the preparation of a successor memorandum of understanding among the 6 agencies to succeed the existing MOU, which has governed us since 2020. In addition, the project team will be establishing and evolving its governance and management bodies, including the establishment of the Portal Board Committee, a standing committee of the TJPA board, and the formation of the Change Control Board to provide for transparency and funding oversight prior to the start of the enabling program early works construction in next calendar year. Finally, as I mentioned, we have been a longstanding partner and funder for the entirety of the Transbay program, including the Transit Center and the Portal project. The Prop L strategic plan baseline, which was before this body and the board earlier this year, identifies a $300 million commitment to the Portal project consistent with the Prop L expenditure plan. And in future months, the Prop L 5-year prioritization programs will be coming forward, including that for DTX, with that 5YP being a condition for future allocation of Prop L funding. Consistent with the board's direction, we provide an enhanced level of oversight of the project, with this work being advanced in coordination with our participation and partnership in project governance bodies and our work to support development of MOU tasks. The focus and character of this oversight will continue to evolve and deepen as the project moves from its current development and design phase ultimately into procurement and construction. Our oversight is supportive of and complementary to the extensive federal oversight which FTA will provide on the project, and will also reflect that local funds would be necessary to cover any increase of cost beyond the FTA commitment to the project established in the coming months. So with that, the recommendation before you today is to adopt a motion of support to the board for the release of the previously allocated sales tax funds, which have been placed on reserve to support the completion of the engineering and procurement preparation phase and to position the project for the next steps in the FTA process. That concludes my remarks. Happy to address any of your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open it up first for public comment. Mr. Mason.
Thank you. When I read this, what caught my eye was the project definition of the train box. And it said the funds were for retrofit of Caltrain's EMU fleet to allow level boarding at the Portal station. Mr. Levine may be the only member of this board that would recognize the fact that on all prior presentations, whether they were Link 21, the alternate train coming in the back door through the Bay Crossing, high-speed rail and Caltrain, I always ask the question, what's going to be the boarding platform? Are all of these agencies going to have the same platform? And now we have to do a retrofit. Somebody dropped the ball and didn't look at the big picture. When I read this, I just exploded, saying all these years before COVID, I made these comments about the boarding platform. And is it going to be compatible with all the agencies that are going to be using it? And then I read this. I'm really disappointed. I hope all of the literature that's available will come true. And if there is bad news, I hope it's brought forth and not as the Central Subway was done at the conclusion of the project. They come up with all these change orders at the end of the project. I expect this project to be managed properly and bad news brought forth. We're all adults, but bureaucracies, always have to paint the picture. Oh, everything is just fine. The only problem is when you peel those layers of that onion off, then you find out the real truth. So I expect to see the truth brought up front. And immediately when problems are identified, that they are brought forth, and then we can work those problems out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have any virtual public comment?
Checking for public comment, and yes, Roland. Can you please unmute yourself by pressing *9 to make your public comment? Okay, all
Thank
right.
you.
Sure, your 2 minutes
Yeah.
begins now. Mhm.
You're getting confused because I'm actually on my computer using my phone as a microphone, okay?
Okay,
So let me start with Mr. Mason's comment. I currently have a PRA on there to Caltrain, but they refuse to respond, so I'm going to file them with a violation of a Public Records Act. As to exactly what they're planning to do with their level boarding retrofit, I got a pretty good idea what it is. The High Speed Rail Authority are essentially behind the entire mess. Specifically, they just issued an RFQ for their train sets, which I'm about to write to the authority about, which automatically disqualifies the only train in the world that is platform compatible with Caltrain. Now, in closing off with what's in front of you tonight, and I'm going to ask you that you approve this, even though the project as currently being proposed by the TJPA is a complete basket case. This 90-degree approach, which is essentially T-boning the train box, is burning half of the length of the platforms, which is going to make it impossible for high-speed trains to basically go there. They're full length. They're going to be able to have half-length trains. I'm going to be reporting this to the High-Speed Rail Inspector General, who's just been appointed by the governor. But in closing, I'm asking you to approve what's in front of you tonight, because this governance proposed by the SFCTA is the only way we're ever going to be able to get this mess back on track. Thank you.
thank you, Roland. And next we have Gerald. You could, let's see, please do click *9. Perfect, thank you. Your 2 minutes begins now. Go ahead.
Okay, I like to associate myself with what Mr. Mason just said a few minutes ago. This project is a risk of becoming so burdened with bureaucracy and interagency complications that it could be very difficult to keep the progress moving at the proper rate and keep the costs under control. I've seen it before. As he said, the Central Subway is a good example. This one, to me, right now, today, is even more complicated in its apparatus for managing the process than the Central Subway was. It sounds to me like half the time of the key people are going to be in explaining what they're doing to other people, who will then have to explain it to still other people. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any communications. I'm just saying that's a risk to be avoided. You have to keep your eye on the ball, which is getting the work done, not just writing reports and making presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. And checking for additional public comments virtually. I see no further public comment for item 5.
Great. We're going to close public comment, and I'm going to open it up to comments from CAC members. So if CAC members have any comments, feel free to raise your note card or your name card. Seeing none, Do we have a motion?
This is member Siegel. I'll move to approve the item.
Member Ortega seconds.
Can we take this as same house, same call?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
On item 5, moved by Vice Chair Siegel, seconded by Ortega, member Barnes.
Barnes, aye.
Barnes, aye. Excuse me, member Chen.
Chen, aye.
Chen, aye, member Daniels.
Daniels, I.
Daniels, aye, member Davidson.
Davidson, aye.
Davidson, aye, member Kim.
Kim's I.
Kim, aye. Member Levine.
Levine abstained.
Levine abstain. Member Ortega.
Ortega, I.
Ortega, aye. Chair Ortiz.
Ortiz, aye.
Ortiz, aye. Vice Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are 8 ayes. Motion is approved.
Great, so we're gonna move on to item 6, which is adopting a motion of support to accept the Transportation Capital Projects Delivery Study. Presenting is gonna be Carl Holmes, our Deputy Director for Capital Projects.
Good evening, everyone, Cherokees and CNC members. Carl Holmes, Deputy Director for Capital Projects. Happy to be here today for a repeat and wanted to give the CEC some insight from the last meeting. So as you recall, the request was for us to meet offline with some of the CEC members, and we did that. So we met with member Ortega and Kim, as well as Chair Ortiz, to walk through what was in the capital projects delivery study, as well as some of the insight as to how we got to where we are proposing to the board. We also wanted to appreciate the comments and the questions from members Ortega, Kim, and Chair Ortiz in regards to topics such as procurement, also topics such as the impacts to businesses. However, that wasn't the charge for this this assignment, and the focus has been as we met with multiple departments. So there were 11 entities within City and County of San Francisco that were part of this effort. And so at the leadership level, there were 11 members that worked through this process, and over 13 staff, basically amongst all those entities. The focus tended to be on communication, collaboration with all the city departments in regards to finding ways to improve and speed up the decision-making when problems arise during construction. So again, the focus is during the construction phase and finding ways to mitigate issues as they come up. And in order to do that, it's making sure that the communication and the collaboration starts before construction, so that when problems do arise, we have a quick way to reach a solution, which indirectly will alleviate impacts to residents and local businesses. The other aspect of this effort was focused on training and standardization of design and other project management principles. And so with that, I want to turn it back to you, Chair Ortiz, and to the CAC, as we believe that we answered the call of the board. But we certainly want to continue tonight to take any other questions or comments. And we could present if the CAC would like us to again, but also want to be judicious of time. We're prepared to do that. So I'm happy to turn it back to you, Chair Ortiz, and proceed how you prefer.
Thank you, Carl. Let's open up first for public comment, and then I can share my remarks.
Thank you, Edward Mason. I hope this works. One of the elements I thought was missing from the project management was to have project managers, designated project managers. You have, with a designation, you have CPL for certified professional logisticians to cover the logistics end of it. So for project management, there's also designations and training that is available at the universities and colleges where people can take a short course in project management, provided they're already in project management, to get that additional certification. I would certainly feel a little more comfortable having those individuals certified to be project managers to embark on these projects. And again, collaboration and coming forth with the bad news is extremely important as far as I'm concerned from my experience in the work environment and also in project management. You got to be upfront about the bad news, believe me, because bad news gets badder. It gets worse, believe me. And be upfront with the bad news. So I'll just conclude with that. And I think I've transmitted my message. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have any virtual public comment? No.
It looks like we've left charities.
Great. So, yeah, I want to first thank Carl and SFCTA staff for meeting with our members, particularly on this item. I feel like we had a really robust conversation, particularly around procurement, as well as, obviously small business impacts when it comes to issues when it comes to late delivery and delays when it comes to capital projects being across the board. So I felt satisfied with the conversation, but I do want to open it up to my other members, Member Ortega and Member Kim, if you have any remarks to say on this.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. Again, I'd also like to express appreciation. I think I ended up taking several hours of their time in this conversation, so I would definitely call that robust. I would like to state that I agree with what this study is trying to do. It is trying to help create a point of contact and create a representative so that we can find the answers that I think a lot of us had concerns about. There are still, I think, outstanding questions, and I was advised that we should be asking the city to be taking a look at this. I believe the mayor's office in particular, in regards to just asking the city and the mayor's office to begin to review all of the procurement questions that I had brought up at the last meeting. I still think that this is an important aspect of the process, but I do believe that this study, as it has been explained to me in robust detail, is a good step in the right direction, and I hope that this will improve the impacts that we have seen across the city. I think that's my summary.
Great, thank you, Member Ortega. Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair, and then thank you, Member Ortega, your the note. So that helps a lot. And then I have similar questions on the note. My question is like economical impact on the small business, but I ask like guidance and then I understand that, but still I have a question. This in the CPMO is value is mutual party and independent kind of project organization, and then as Mr. Mason mentioned, project management key is something happen in each critical point. They have to make decision, go or not to go. So this is a critical thing. If something project management found something, they said not to go, then they get a lot of attention from the stakeholders, especially here, a lot of department, 11 department. But I don't see any kind of specific measure or tools we can do this? Conceptually, there's a good wording, but I don't see how can we implement that one in the actual project. So that's still my questions. Probably this study is overall in a goal and then the direction where we go. So hopefully those detailed tools will be described and then established in the later study. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Kim. I see Member Bars.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. I was absent at the last meeting, so I unfortunately did not get to hear your presentation. I have gone through the slides. I have two questions. The first is that if the key study finding, one of the first key study findings was that we needed to streamline the city department decision-making processes and focus on timely decision-making across departments. How does creating a new department help do that?
Thank you, Member Bars. The idea is for this neutral party under the city administrator's office would be able to get multiple departments together in a faster way and also be able to influence the right decision-making or the speedy decision-making to occur. I can just give a random example. If SFCTA is delivering a project, let's just say on an island, and we also have utilities that need to be moved or rerouted, then we need to work with an agency like SFPUC. We also may need to work with another agency like SFCTA. So you now have three agencies that deliver projects. It's an SFCTA project that I'm describing. PUC has their projects, MTA has their projects. So we all are trying to manage our own staff, our own projects, and with all the fiscal challenges that we are all facing, when it comes to prioritization, having the right staff people assigned to projects to be able to give decisions, meaning take a look at the site to see what is holding up something that's not resolved, if it's a utility that's in the wrong location or a utility that no one knows about. Getting the right person out there timely to be able to say what it is or find out what it is and get back to the project. And then if traffic needs to be rerouted, having the right person with MTA to be able to coordinate that and making sure that the public is not impacted or businesses aren't impacted for as long as they could be if the coordination doesn't exist. So the city administrator's office doesn't have projects. They're under the mayor's office. And so by not having their own projects, they're more neutral because they would look at the bigger picture in regards to trying to get the right people or the right leadership if the people that are assigned aren't able to deliver in a responsive way. So that's the concept is getting an entity that is respected but is also neutral, doesn't have projects, so there is less perceived conflict. And with the idea of keeping projects moving forward.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. My second question is, it said on I think it's slide 13 that maybe I have this right. Sorry, slide 12. You have the case study project examples and then potential projects for pilot program. And I just noticed that the portal project delivery phase is listed as one that could be in the pilot program. Could you just explain what would change from what is if they were in the pilot program for this CPMO managed project?
So it's not necessarily about what could change. It's about at least including it in regards to the purview of the city administrator's office. And given that as Jesse and TGPA are working through the new governance structure, we already have multiple agencies, 6 agencies working together on this project. Of course, we want to make sure that the new governance allows for productive movement and decision-making. And there's also, TGPA is working separately with City and County of San Francisco on a separate agreement, as well as with Caltrain on a separate agreement. So there's avenues for the city administrator's office to be involved. So it's not necessarily about what will change, it's about utilizing that resource to be able to be helpful in the process.
Thank you.
Do we have any for member Levine?
Excuse me. I guess I'm trying to get a sense about the power that this office would have. It seems as though they'd be operating as an arbiter rather than as a decision making body. Is that correct? Because in the end, it just seems like the decisions are still going to lie in the hands of the agency, and that this new body doesn't have the power, or might not have the power, to actually say, this is the way we're going to go. You know, this agency is going to do this work now, and then there's going to be some sort of scheduling or whatever process they take. This new body simply will not have the power, as I understand it, to make those decisions. They'd still lie with the agencies. Is that correct?
So I would not take the liberty to question the power of the city administrator's office. However, I would say that I think you're onto something in regards to being an arbiter or facilitator. However, I would not underestimate the city administrator's office if they should decide on a way to resolve an issue if 2 entities or more are not able to reach an agreement. I'm sure the city administrator's office will seek the experts within those respective agencies to make sure that there's enough information. But at some point, if a decision needs to be made, I wouldn't underestimate that the city administrator would make a decision if needed.
Would they, I'm just trying to get a sense of, would the agency have that power built into the regs about the agency itself?
Again, I can't speak to that. However, I would say that I would believe and trust with the city administrator's office that they would do what they think is necessary to get the right information from the various departments, knowing that there's positive pressure on that office to produce a result. But I couldn't speak on their behalf to say how much power they have or how quickly they could arrive to a decision. But the fact that their office is named, I think that's positive pressure in regards to getting through log jams to reach conclusion and keep projects moving
I
forward.
understand where you come from. Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from members? Seen a motion? Not all at once.
I'll move to approve this item.
Bar second.
Great. So motion by member Levine, second by member Bars. Do we have a roll call vote, or do we want anyone to abstain? What do you do? I mean, same house phone call,
We need to take a
roll call, okay, one more time, okay, got it, okay. Let's,
On item 6, member Barnes.
Bars I.
Barnes, I, member Chen.
Chen I.
Chen, I, member Daniel.
Daniel, I.
Daniel's I, member Davidson.
Davidson I.
Davidson, I, member Kim.
Kim, I.
Kim, I, member Levine.
Levine, I.
Levine, I, member Ortega.
Ortega, I.
Ortega, I, Chair Ortiz. Ortiz, I. Ortiz, I, Vice Chair Siegel.
Siegel, I.
Siegel, I, there are 9 ayes, the motion is approved. Great, that was the fastest roll call I think we've ever done. Let's go into item number 7, which is adopting a motion of support to adopt the Treasure Island supplemental study and TIP planning final report. Thank you, Carl, for your presentation. We're going to be having Rachel here, Deputy Director for Planning, presenting.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Good to see you all again. And I'm gonna try to do this for the first time correctly. And I see my presentation. Use this one, and I need to share it first, right? Now I need to make this maximized. This. Okay, all right. So this is a neighborhood transportation planning project from District 6 focused on Treasure Island, which as I'm sure most everyone knows is under development, comprehensive redevelopment over several decade period. And although the development will bring new infrastructure and transportation improvements, many of those will roll out over years, to decades. And so the charge here was to work with the current residents of the island as well as current workers to identify supplemental services and improvements that can address the current needs that folks have right now. We partnered with One Treasure Island, who is the umbrella community-based organization for the island. There's a number of members that One Treasure Island provides overall sort of organizing and support for. And they led the outreach on our behalf. Let me skip to that actually and then go back, because the outreach had these 3 main components. So One Treasure Island assembled a working group of residents and workers representing the diversity of folks who currently live and work on the island. We worked with them together to conduct a needs assessment survey, and then at the end of the study conducted focus groups to help get to the final recommendations. One of the things that I want to share is that we learned that many existing San Francisco services and programs that should serve Treasure Island and should serve every neighborhood are just things that folks aren't aware of. And so a lot of the needs we were hearing from folks would point out, there is an essential trip card that you probably are eligible for, and it can use that, to help offset costs of your essential trips. Services like the Van Gogh shuttle or the Shop Around shuttle, the MTA's paratransit office operates to support folks with mobility disabilities and seniors, and even things like the Lifeline Pass of discounted Muni fare. So we had the opportunity to share all of those existing services, but we also worked with this work group, and then through the focus groups and needs assessment survey, prioritized 5 ultimately priority actions out of a whole set of 14, 5 in the top, and they're in these 4 different categories, which were co-developed with the work group. The first of the 5 is addressing safety concerns through a community ambassador program on the ground in Treasure Island, helping just be ambassadors on the bus or on the street, even being stationed at transit stops. And this is something that for the street ambassador role, that One Treasure Island currently has some funding to pilot. They don't have funding to sustain that indefinitely, but funding to pilot. This improvement is the one capital project of the bunch of the 5, and it's to improve the bus shelters that are in the last phase of development, because you can have a whole life cycle, useful life of bus shelter improvements by the time these are going to be rebuilt. Next, Muni service. So as many neighborhoods did, the 25 route had decreased service during the COVID era, operations cutbacks, and the construction that happens on the island has meant that Muni has needed to increase their run time, so the frequencies are less. So there are some sources, such as the Lifeline Transportation Program, one of very few for which transit operations has historically been eligible and MTA has used in the past to increase services on the 25. Like many grant sources, though, it's not a guaranteed permanent source. So it ultimately would probably need to find a permanent operating source to sustain that indefinitely. A micro transit is something that responds to the community interest in accessing multiple mainland destinations through a single ride. The Muni 25 just stops at the Salesforce Transit Center, and the Treasure Island Mobility Management role, which has not started yet and is potentially would start in say 5 years or so. There's no launch date at this time. Is responsible for operating an on-island on-demand shuttle and an East Bay on-demand shuttle, and so the concept there is that potentially be extended to mainland destinations, again with pending funding. And then lastly, there was a lot of just interest in marketing and communications around the services that are available and the new services as they come online. So going forward, it would be a partnership with the city, the implementing agencies in One Treasure Island to identify first, pilot funding where applicable to pilot some of these recommendations, and then most importantly, identify permanent operating funding for those recommendations that are ongoing operations and meet that. One of the benefits potentially of Treasure Island is that if the Treasure Island Mobility Management Program launches, that's a potential source that would endure into the future. So happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Let's open up first for public comment.
Edward Mason, one comment that I have was regarding the new bus shelters. Whatever they do, I hope they place the bus shelter so the back will be where the prevailing winds come in. Not like we have in San Francisco, where we just place a bus shelter routinely, because you can stand there, you're facing south, and guess what? The rain and the wind come from the southwest. So bus shelter doesn't have any meaning. And in my years at Treasure Island, that's very important, because I'll tell you, come summertime, when that fog comes through the Golden Gate, it's 9 o'clock at night, you don't want to be there. So the bottom line is the shelters should be a priority, and the placement of those shelters for the comfort of everyone. To me, that's priority number one. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have any other public comment virtually?
Yes, checking for public comment. Roland, please unmute with *9.
Thank you.
Sure.
Perfect.
Thank
No, it's not *9, it's my mouse.
Okay.
Anyway, just gonna follow up on what Edward Mason just said, and obviously we're talking about Treasure Island here, but what I want to bring to your attention is a problem that you might not necessarily see on Treasure Island, but you're definitely going to see in downtown San Francisco. It's on Treasure Island. From what I've observed, people tend to observe the speed limit, which is probably below 25, so this shouldn't be an issue. But we have had instances in San Jose where a speeding car would lose control. It has actually happened multiple times, and wipe out the entire bus shelter, including the people who were sitting there waiting for their bus. And the recommendations I made in San Jose is to look at the surrounding potential protection Like say, for instance, if you got a lamppost, it would be a good idea to put the shelter, behind the lamppost. Or if you happen to have a tree. And that is something I think people should be thinking about. But then again, as I said, it's probably not that critical on Treasure Island because people don't drive like at 50 or 60 miles an hour on the island. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further public virtual comment.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna open it up to questions from our CAC members, and I see Vice Chair Siegels. And
Thank you, Chair Ortiz, and thank you, Director Hyatt, for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is just about the shelters. I was curious if the shelters that will be replacing the current shelters are the same as the standard worm shelters used throughout the city.
No, they are old. They're very old. So,
the ones that are replacing the old ones.
oh, yes, so they would be where shelters are put in, they would be the new style of shelter.
Okay, all right. Just as a comment, I would say, actually, one thing that has always struck me when I have been on the island is that those shelters, although they are old and clearly need to be replaced or retrofitted, do provide more weather protection than the ones here in the city, like because they're fully enclosed. And I would just be curious, it seems more important maybe on Treasure Island than a lot of other places in the city because of the wind concern, but I would just love to, I don't know, see exploration of making them more weather resistant for folks waiting for the bus. And then another thing I was wondering was whether the TA might ever consider trying to pilot like a free program for the 25 lines specifically. I know there's like a bit of precedent in other cities for making certain routes free, but just, I think we know that things like the Lifeline program or Free Community for Youth, often people just don't know about them and it's hard to reach folks. And given how important of a connection that is for folks on the island, and also what a benefit it is for everyone, for residents and workers to take the bus as opposed to clogging the highway onto the island. I would love to see like some kind of estimation of what the financial impact to MTA and the city would be to do something like that. Like I would just love to see it explored. I know that there has over the years been talk of doing pilot programs citywide, but at a route level, the 25 seems like a really great candidate for a program like that. And I would love to see just what would it cost and would MTA be willing to pursue something like that. So I'm not sure if that's something you can answer, but just as a comment.
Well, I can just, offer a quick thought, which is one way that the Treasure Island Mobility Program will be unique is that it is meant to offer a transit pass, a multi-operator transit pass to residents. Now, the residents in market rate units would be paying for still a subsidized version to access all of the systems serving the island through their homeowner dues. But for people in below market rate units, where there would be either a discount, deeply discounted, or potentially, because the price isn't set, potentially it's fully subsidized. So, and that would offer unlimited access to the ferry and the AC Transit and the Muni system. Now, the price for that hasn't been set yet, but it's something that the future mobility program is meant to deliver.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I would love to at some point see just like an estimation of what it might cost the city to make the line free in general, just for everyone visiting the island. Thank you.
great, thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. Member Bars.
Thank you, Chair Ortiz. Thank you for the presentation, Director Hyatt. I have a question. Well, all right, I have a comment and a question. So I wanted to, here's the comment. I'd like to actually second what Vice Chair Siegel just said. I'd be very curious to see what the financial impact would be to just making the 25 free and how that compares to the costs of the pass. Like, I think that would be like a very interesting comparison.
Sure.
And in particular, because, and I have some professional experience with this, right? Like all of the programs that you described, that I think the answer in the slide deck was about doing communications about existing programs, all have an administrative burden.
Sure.
Yeah. So if it's possible to just reduce that burden for users by making the primary bus line free, I think that there'd be additional benefits beyond just the cost. Then my question, so on the micro transit slide, which I thought was really quite interesting, I'm just curious what besides the Bayview Community Shuttle pilot, which looks like a very promising pilot, what other forms of microtransit have you looked to as models of success to adopt and use for this service?
Well, for this particular service?
Yeah.
So for this particular service, the priority for folks is that they wanted service on where the additional Muni service where the Muni service is less frequent, so evenings and weekends, so non-peak, and they want to access on-island destinations with a single ride, like groceries, school was one for the older kids, healthcare. So there were some themes in the destinations, that they brought up. And one of the purposes of the microtransit would be sort of proof of concept or test out what destinations are people hailing to actually see, what, if this is a pilot, where do we see that usage? And that was something that MTA, one of the reasons that MTA was interested in kind of looking at this idea, because in the long run, with the new development, there is to be another Muni route, another permanent Muni route, but to where, and so this is something that would actually, they thought, collect some data for them on what people vote with their feet.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. I will just offer that for a very short time was very interested professionally in microtransit services and felt like a lot of them failed. But one of them that I will just offer from my personal experience seems to work pretty well is the Silicon Valley Hopper. And Sunnyvale and Cupertino seems to be doing well. So if you were looking at services to model this or build this, I would encourage you to look at that one.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Member Bars. I just have a couple quick comments on this as well too. I would echo my colleagues' remarks, particularly on seeing about making, and I would like to see particularly, I think we'll have that come up in new business about exploring a study of what it would cost to, actually make the 25 free. I remember taking the 25. So for personal context, I've lived on the island twice. Once when I was a Job Corps attendee, and the second time as an actual just a resident. I remember taking it as a child from it being a 108 to the 25. And it's also one of those things where it truly is the definition of a transit desert. Because after 8 p.m., you don't know when the bus is coming. You don't know when you're going to be able to get home. You don't know when you're going to be able to leave the island. I remember being very reliant on, at that time, Lyft, because it was the only way to really get on and off the island. In times when I was going to meet my new baby cousin that was going to be born in the middle of the night, and not being able to actually take more of our collective, like our more robust transit services on there. And so also there's a lot of attendees that come for tourist events, right?
Yeah.
And so, like the 4th of July celebrations and things like that. And so it really does play a major impact on like residents on having consistent services in place, right? And I would say, while it's great that we're looking at studying this, we also need to improve a lot of the services in general, because it wasn't great. It was really, really bad. And so I think, I would want to explore how we can actually make more regular. So we're not just expanding it and making it free and then it still doesn't run, but actually we're actually improving the service that it's like any other neighborhood in San Francisco, to being able to actually, consistently go through and being able to go to and from, because, people on the island are really left in, again, a desert. And especially with all the new development that is coming into place, right, with the potential of the new school that's going to need to be built according to the California State Education Code, since with all this new development is going to be coming in, like we should really explore how we, the island is really taken care of. So I think that's something we'll probably be exploring in new business, but just wanted to share that as well. Do we have any other comments, thoughts from members? Seeing none, do we want to open it up for a motion?
It's member Siegel, I move to approve the item.
Great, Vice Chair Siegel makes a motion. Do we have a second? Second for member Kim. Can we take this by same house, same call?
Without objection. Item 7 is approved.
Great, thank you.
Same house, same call.
So now we're gonna move on to item 8, which is adopting a motion of support to increase the amount of professional services contract with WMH Corporation by $350K to a total amount not to exceed $3,050,000 and extend the contract through June 30th, 2025 for the design phase and Caltrain's right-of-way approval for the Yerba Buena Hillcrest Road Improvement Project and for design service during construction. This is an action item. Let's take 9 at the same time as well too, which is also going to be adopting a motion to the support to approve a 2-year professional services contract with CM Company in an amount not to exceed 5.5 for construction management services for the Yerba Buena Hillcrest Road Improvement Project, Torpedo Building Preservation Project, and Pier E2 Phase 2 Project. Also an action item. Presenting, we're going to have Mike Tan, Senior Engineer, here in person. Thank you, Mike.
Chair Chiefs, I was going to attempt to summarize, but have Mike Tan here in case there's questions, comments, another efficiency moment. I know Mike's ready to present. On the WMH contract, that is, we're seeking approval for an increase of $350,000. And this is to finish the design of the Hillcrest project. So on the screen is the map of Yerba Buena Island, which some, if not all of you, have already seen. In the green is the Hillcrest project limits, so the bottom right of the screen. And we are currently at 95%. This project is fully funded. The base scope is fully funded by Housing Community Development, HCD, via an infill infrastructure grant, also known as IIG, in the amount of $30 million. But there was a cap, a 10% cap on soft costs. So we were only allowed to manage this with $3 million. So we had executed a contract for $2.7 million. And fortunately, we were able to get approval from HCD to increase the cap to $3.2 million, which allows us to not only finish the design, but also have room in there for our own staff costs and other management duties that's needed. So with that, the $350,000 that we're proposing to add is still within the project budget. And so it does not change the project budget. It's just, we're fortunate we're able to get approval from HCD. This is a good news story. I also need to let the CAC know that in addition to this, we're trying to add some efficiency in terms of being public stewards of public funds. So you may have also heard about the multi-use path, which is basically everything that's colored on the far right, going all the way up to the bottom and all the way to the far left. That is basically roughly a 16-foot wide bike and ped path. We are still in early design, and in some cases, in early design. We are trying to see if we could complete the multi-use path scope that's within the Hillcrest limits at the same time. So we're trying to avoid building out Hillcrest and then a year or two later, basically having to remove some of the improvements, such as a retaining wall, and then to dig deeper into the hillside and build a taller retaining wall. Of course, it's set up to where we could proceed in a segmented basis, but we're trying to be efficient. And so with that effort, we're working with PPD, and so Deputy Director and our report will likely be bringing something back to you in the coming months in regards to some funding swaps to be able to make this happen. And we're also working with MTC and other city departments to see if we could contribute to this effort that would need to be funded. We've identified what we think the cost will be. But all that being said, what we're presenting to you today, $350,000, is within budget, and it allows us to complete the 100% design. I just wanted to, for transparency's sake, also let you know we're trying to do more, and we're still in the throes of making it happen.
Carl, if I may, just in case it wasn't clear for anyone, because I'm making Carl go fast, my bad. The multi-use path is meant to provide a connection from the Bay Bridge, right, all the way down to the new ferry terminal on Treasure Island.
Great, thank you for that context. And so let's open it up first to public comment.
And Chair Ortiz, I'm happy to go into the next item.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go for it.
So the next item is the Hillcrest Construction Management Services. Also, the scope that's in the green on the screen. We issued a request for proposals. We received 4 proposals. We interviewed 3, and we arrived at a selection to award 2 separate contracts. One is for the Hillcrest base scope, which is in the green, to WSP. There's some advantages to adjacency because WSP is also managing the construction for West Side Bridges. And then the other 2 scopes that are part of this RFP is the torpedo building and the Pier E2 Phase 2, which is essentially parking lot, increased access and restroom and other facilities. Pier E2 and the torpedo building are underneath the bridge. So just above the yellow section that's the south gate, so underneath the bridge at that point closer to the water. The other 2 scopes are proposed to be selected to go to a firm named GHD, and they are the selection panel was pleased with their experience in the Bay Area as well as their experience with BCDC. That selection is in the value of $1.2 million, and the WSP selected award is in the value of $4.3 million. With that, I'll turn it over to Chair Ortiz.
Great, thank you. Let's first open up to public comment. Nothing for Mr. Mason. I think Roland had his hand up.
Yes, Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. And this is a very quick comment, really, for the benefit of Mr. Holmes. Well, it's too bad we just lost the slide, but if you look at this curvature of Hillcrest, it is really kind of a 90-degree, and I was really hoping that would be more of a curve than a 90-degree turn. Having said that, I do understand why you designed it the way that you did. But the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is that if the Link 21 project listens to common sense, this is where the new Transbay tube shafts are going to be located. And the way I've heard these shafts being characterized in San Jose as a 3-ring caterpillar. Essentially, it's 3 shafts that are secanted, they cut into each other, and they're about 50 or 60 feet in diameter. And they have to fit right there in the bottom corner of the island. So if the people who are designing this could please bear this in mind and not prevent this, what is definitely is the best alignment for new Transbay tube, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. There's no further public comment, no further hands raised for this item.
Great. Let's open it up to questions from our CAC members. I see Member Ortega.
Hi. Hello. I'm hoping this is gonna be pretty quick. If you could bring that map up again. there's something that I'm trying to figure out. And that is this lovely construction project. I do not think addresses the one complaint I have about Treasure Island, which is the stop sign before getting onto the highway. And I just wanted to know if that was like a thing that was gonna be looked at or addressed, or if I can't read or it's getting replaced and that's the thing that's going on, because I have to say, I've driven in a lot of states, I've driven in New York City, and the only time I've ever actually been scared was getting off of Treasure Island onto 80 at night when every car was going over the speed limit, probably 70 miles an hour, and there was a stop sign right before the merge. And that's just horrifying for me. And I never drive there because I refuse to go take that stop sign. And I just can't see on this map if that is being looked at, if there's a new route and I'm just not reading correctly. Could you just, or if it's not getting fixed with all the wonderful infrastructure improvements we're gonna do. It was heading back to the city, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Member Ortega, for the question. So, basically for the Hillcrest project, we are in between the West Side Bridges and the South Gate project.
Okay.
So we're not directly at the on-off ramp, although we are leading to the on-ramps. So if you look on the map and then you look at the Evergreen section, and then you kind of see a curve at the bottom, and on the right of that curve for the dark green line, so that stops at Forest Road intersection. Okay, and that's currently a stop sign because there's still a lot of construction going on, and then traffic will continue onward to either the eastbound I-80 freeway or underneath through the Southgate project to McCullough Road.
Okay.
But Member Ortega, are you speaking about the original on-ramp, and as you're trying to get onto 80 going to San Francisco where you're stopped and you're trying to get onto the bridge? Is that what you're referring to? So I don't believe that this project addresses that. That's more of, I believe that would be a bridge function. However, I will take an action to follow up to see what if anything can or will or should be done. But I just wanted to just make sure that we were tracking what you're asking about. But in general, I don't believe the project it's out of the project scope. However, I believe I know what you're talking about in regards to knowing you have to punch the accelerator to get onto the bridge.
Yeah, it's just if this isn't the right project, that's fine. I know that there's a lot of projects. I think that's why I just got confused with this particular map. If you guys wouldn't mind just taking a look at that and letting me know, because I would be very curious to see how many accidents result in that stop merge. It's truly terrifying.
Yes, the project will be facilitating traffic onto the bridge. However, when you get to that stop sign that I think you're referring to, that's outside of our scope.
Okay.
However, I'll take an action to follow up with Caltrans to see what can be done.
Yeah.
But I can't promise, only because I think it's a function of the limits of the width of the bridge.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
Great. I will say I was really impressed when I was going to an affordable housing site for a grand opening, and being able to have our Lyft driver miss the off ramp and being able to catch the other off ramp was really exciting. So, I'm really impressed with how this project has played out. So just wanted to give the shout out to staff on that for all your work on it. Do we have any other questions, comments, thoughts from members? If not, can we entertain a motion?
Ortega, motions.
Great, Member
If interest, is this for both 8 and 9 or?
For both 8 and 9.
Oh, okay. I'll second.
Great, thank you, Member Levine. Can we take the same house and call? Well, let's wait
Yes.
real quick.
We can,
Oh.
Yes, we can without objection. All right, items 8 and 9 are approved.
Great, thank you. Now let's go on to thank you so much for the presentation. I think we have a lot of questions on this next item, so without further ado, I want to invite Jean-Paul Velez to give an update on the autonomous vehicles update. This is an informational item.
No.
Okay, like John Paul brings this up, I'll say this is a preview of a more substantial presentation that John Paul is working on for the board meeting at the end of September. So and this will give the CAC some great background and really encourage you to tune in at the board meeting if this is exciting.
Thank you. Yes, my name is John Paul Velez, and I'll introduce myself as
John
the,
Paul, sorry. can you
I'm
turn
sorry,
on the
where's
mic?
this on?
And pull it close,
The
you see
red.
red light, there you go.
There you go.
I was about to introduce myself. Another example as the kind of the policy, the tech policy principal with the TA, but quite embarrassing. My very basic tech failures in front of all of you. But again, apologies for that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you all today. Again, in terms of introduction to this item, probably you've seen a lot about AVs in the news. And the idea is to share some of the work that we've been doing with regards to AVs that is not as visible, and also provide you with additional facts, other elements for you to assess the situation yourselves and provide us some feedback, and again, be better prepared for the board item that we are planning to have in a couple of weeks' time. I guess we begin with something predating AVs, which is that San Francisco has been the epicenter for many emerging mobility innovations in the country or the world, from PNCs to Chariot to the scooters. The idea of these principles came about as a way to guide those innovations, those that we confronted and those that are to come, we just need new tools to engage with that are kind of traditional planning structures perhaps are not best suited for. Again, the idea of these principles came about and was an effort jointly developed by the TA and SFCTA. And the idea was to make clear to private providers or any other innovator, San Francisco's vision and expectations for these services. And so again, if these services are to prove that they advance all of these principles that you see here, from safety to supporting the city's transits first kind of policy, sustainability, collaboration among stakeholders, equity, labor, congestion, financial impact, all of these, disability access, then great, you're welcome, and we're very excited to kind of have you join our city and the multiple layers, I guess, of our mobility ecosystem. But if they pose risks to those goals, then it's our role to actually create the guardrails to really kind of channel those innovations to support those principles. And that's kind of the idea of these concepts that you see here. And unfortunately, AVs seem to be compromising many of these principles that, and the challenge to this is that we in San Francisco don't have the regulatory authority to actually manage these services better. And so how does one go about walking through that challenge? So just to give you a little bit more framework about that last statement, this is the basic regulatory framework that kind of
rules the operation of AV and AV passenger services, which is what the cruise and Waymos that you see are. So again, it's broken up through our kind of whole traditional structure, federal level, state level, and local level. At the federal level, the main agency, the agency lead is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And as you see in the bold, their main responsibility is kind of like overseeing the regulations around vehicle equipment. Then we move to the state side, and then when we go to the DMV, the ones that issue our licenses, as you see, the responsibility for them is to kind of issue to regulate safety around the driver. And the CPUC, commercial passengers safety. The easier example to think about is Uber and Lyft. CPUC is the one that kind of regulates their operations. It's done again at the state level, not at the local level, like for instance, taxis, which we regulate locally. And then here in SF, there's actually no authority over AVs specifically. SFMTA regulates the use of the right of way. The TA kind of sets congestion management policy and provides other strategic advice, but specific tools to engage AVs are not there. And so, you know, again, this breakdown this breakdown of different roles was created not thinking of AVs, and then what we see and kind of what's highlighted a little bit at the bottom of the graph is the gaps that the logic has created or they have created. So, for instance, in the case of AVs, the vehicle equipment is the driver. So who is in charge of actually regulating this driver and its competencies, right? And there's a lot of kind of questions that may linger around that. Or for instance, with regards to issues around the road safety impacts that these passenger services cause or may have. Again, there's this kind of limbo or gap, whether it's the DMV or it's actually the CPUC that should regulate those issues. And then locally, again, we're faced at the city level with all of these different impacts, and yet again, who is in charge of helping us advance or protect protect us from those impacts? So with that in mind, I guess that background in mind, this here aims to give you a little bit of kind of a notion of the current context for AV passenger services here in San Francisco. You know, AVs have been testing for years in San Francisco for the longest time with safety drivers behind the wheels. In case anything malfunctioned, they were able to jump in, correct, and kind of mitigate risks or malfunctions and other events. But then more recently, they began to kind of increase their driverless operations, so fully again autonomous. And then also last year, pardon me, in May of last year, the CPUC actually authorized Cruise to operate driverless commercial service. So actually taking rides from Cruise within a small area in San Francisco and only at night, like from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. So trying to avoid kind of creating too much trouble with those operations. So that was kind of the status quo up until August 10th, when the CPUC actually granted both Cruise and Waymo full permission to operate driverless service, commercial driverless service for a fare throughout all of San Francisco, 24/7, no restrictions on time and no restrictions also on fleet. They can have as big a fleet as they may please. And so again, our action was to immediately file motions to stay both of those approvals by the PUC. And then literally after we filed that motion to stay, following various malfunctions and safety incidents from Cruise, the DMV actually stepped in and had Cruise cut their fleets in half pending further investigation. That was about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. And so let's kind of look into exactly what was it that the DMV saw that really kind of freaked them out. And so again, one day, just literally one day after the approval of this kind of full commercial operations for both of the providers. We had this first incident, August 11th, Friday night, when there were 10 cruise vehicles that basically bricked in the middle of North Beach, and they created a huge, traffic jam and kind of blocking traffic for many blocks for a range of different people, and that caused a lot of, again, concerns, and it was in the media. At first, crews argued that it was a problem with cell connectivity, kind of following the outside lands, and later they kind of backtracked that, and they said that it was a pedestrian, that someone caused 10 vehicles to kind of have this huge kind of, again, blocks wide malfunction. And I don't think there's a straight, clear story yet of what is it that happened. But obviously, what was of more concern was what happened a week later, on Thursday, August 17, when there were two separate crashes involving cruise vehicles. The first one was with a fire truck that was responding to an emergency. So the fire truck, with its sirens on, actually ran through a red light, and the cruise was able to detect it, but not able to get out of the way. And of more concern, there was actually a passenger in that cruise vehicle that got T-boned, as you see in that picture over there. And then there was another second crash that very same night on 26th and Mission. And so that is really kind of what raises the alarms, or that those are the triggering events for the DMV to actually come in and kind of have the fleet cut in half until this kind of further investigation takes place. Now, in our various kind of filings to the regulators dating back to September of last year, to NHTSA, to the CPUC, and to the DMV over again this last year, we have been documenting that the amount of incidents that we have seen on our streets kind of point to this very direction, which is that we were seeing a range of different kind of malfunctions from these vehicles in terms of their ability to navigate kind of like more non-standard scenarios, from dealing with emergency response situations, with transit. And so, as you can see in the graph in the left, when we started documenting all of these incidents, what we see is that on a monthly basis, these incidents have increasing in number and also in the gravity of the incident and the risks that the incidents pose. And so our argument to the PUC were that, first of all, these were leading indicators that they were pointing to something more concerning potentially happening in the future. And so our advice was to take a more gradual approach for allowing these expansions of AVs in San Francisco based on performance and based on very transparent evaluations of the data available. So let me give you a quick kind of taxonomy, if you will, of the different incidents that you saw on that bar chart before. So kind of a huge amount of these incidents again reflect are regards to obstructions of fire trucks and other interference with emergency response scenes. So for instance, you see in the left, there's this Waymo vehicle that kind of runs into a fire truck. It doesn't know what to do, so it does what these vehicles do, which is they kind of brick. They turn into a brick because that's what they like to call a minimal risk condition to avoid any further damage. But a brick vehicle that doesn't allow a fire truck to actually make a turn and attend to an emergency is also a huge risk, not a minimal risk condition to the city of San Francisco. We have cases in which, again, these vehicles go into active fire scenes. They go across areas that are marked with caution tape. These are things that a normal human driver never do, or very, very rarely would do. You see, again, that example on the top where there's an actual firefighter, like with a flame, trying to kind of stop the vehicle in whichever way possible to come in further into this fire scene and then kind of harm and distract all other firefighters from what's going on. And then there's been a couple of incidents of AVs, charge hoses, so that's hoses with water, and the amount of pressure in those hoses represents a big, big risk if you actually drive over them. So far, no one has been harmed, but again, doesn't mean that the risk hasn't been there before. Here's another kind of set of incidents that are again of huge concern to us, which is with regards to obstruction of bus and rail transit, because of the number of people that are impacted by this type of behaviors. So there was a crash that we see in the left where the cruise vehicle was not able, I think they argued, to recognize how the length of this articulated bus, it kind of projected through its I guess algorithms, that the length of the bus was shorter and they just straight up kind of rear-ended it. Then we have on the top kind of right an incident in which again this is the Judah kind of rang its bell to kind of claim its possession of the intersection and its right of way, and yet this cruise driver still kind of or vehicle kind of drove through and caused again this vehicle took a fair amount of time for it to get removed, and so a lot of the people that were in that in Judah, which I think were hundreds of people that the people coming back from a game or something, I believe, had to kind of get off the bus and cause again this ripple effect, I suppose, to transit operations, right? In terms of when would these folks get to their buses? The same happened with this other kind of incidents of encroachment into bus lanes. Again, this example on the left, I guess, or the middle there, you see also created like a ripple effect of kind of bus operations on Mission Street, again, causing a lot of delays for a number of transit riders, not only the ones that were in that bus that got delayed by this encroachment. And then here's another kind of broader kind of family of incidents where we see just kind of straight up crash violations of the vehicle code and other kind of forms of hazards. We have, again, I'll start from the top, like intrusions into work zones, endangering workers. This crew, in this case, there's a waymo that almost goes into a ditch, and folks had to kind of stop it, and they were able to do it. We have on the bottom left this kind of practices of unsafe pickup and drop off, where they actually go pick up. You see on the left an actual designated zone for pickup and drop off that is clear, no vehicles parked, and yet you see on the cruise vehicle, I believe, actually doing the pickup on the other side of the street, making folks cross the street and create both, again, safety and traffic kind of impacts. You see another example here, and there's plenty of examples of these vehicles encroaching into pedestrian crosswalks with pedestrians on the crosswalk. In the middle, we have this example of a brick, it's way more cruise, I believe it's a way in this case. And just you see the amount of traffic and congestion that they cause. And sometimes they report, I guess again, not to get into the weeds of it, but it takes for them a long time to resolve this type of kind of braking remotely with remote operators, or in many cases, they actually have to send an actual person to retrieve the vehicle, and all the time that all that process takes is again felt in on our network operations. And last but not least, there's even this kind of sad case of Waymo actually killing a dog. That to point to another challenge of these of what we're facing was only caught because there was there was a safety driver in the vehicle, so he was able to actually stop the vehicle and then report that a dog was killed. But had not there been such safety driver, potentially no one would have even known that happened, and there's no way for registering events of this kind in our in the data that the regulators receive or that we're able to analyze in a more formal way. Here's kind of the chronology of all of the different kind of filings that we've kind of shared with the different regulators documenting these problems just in the last year. So as far as what the CPUC and the DMV approvals show, I suppose that we haven't been too successful having our concerns addressed. But again, we've definitely kind of made a very huge effort in terms of putting all of those concerns up in front and center for the regulators to consider. But now, again, with this whole kind of range of new issues and the full kind of citywide approval and the crashes that I mentioned, they should gaining more visibility. The chair of the communications and conveyance Assembly Committee has sent a couple of letters to the DMV and the PUC asking them what is it that they're doing, how is it that these issues were addressed and how is it that they happened. Similarly, like Assemblymember Ting has been kind of really starting to press kind of the regulators to try to understand better how is it that this is happening. So again, there's additional visibility kind of building up, and I think that's also part of what we're trying to bring to the forefront with this presentation and with the board item in a few weeks' time. So just to give you a sense quickly, I mentioned this already, but just to reassess this concept. You know, we believe that it's truly incredible that we're here when you think about it. Now, the notion that people are literally taking driverless rides to get from different places in San Francisco, it's already very amazing. And it's a big outcome, it's a big win for the regulations that kind of build a framework for getting us to that place. But now that success has been achieved, I think the challenge is to think more broadly and beyond just standing up an industry, but actually guaranteeing the long-term success of that industry. And again, going back to the idea of the principles that we were discussing before, having that industry support city goals in terms of mobility and more broadly. And so we think that, again, the time is now to develop more mature regulations that, again, have like that reflect our more experience-based know-how of what were the holes in all of these regulations that are in place and where the needs to actually bring this industry to where we want it to be. And so we think that, again, core elements that need to be improved upon is the expansion of data reporting, making that data more transparent. There's a lot of data that is reported to regulators, but is not shared with the public under, I guess, privacy or proprietary business kind of concerns. There's also a lack of performance benchmarks. All of these approvals have been conducted without any clarity of what is actually evaluated and how is it approved. Then again, the idea of incrementality, like we don't think that like if you go from like just testing with safety drivers to then having kind of citywide services. And then last but not least, again, just updates to the vehicle code. You cannot issue a ticket to an AV. And so they basically go unpunished for, again, all of these issues that we've been mentioning before. So perhaps to kind of offer a different approach, and I'll share quickly like our TI AV shuttle project, which, you know, showcases a different way of building up kind of like a new mobility service. So again, as we were discussing in the prior items, Treasure Island is a low density area where, you know, we have the opportunity to start gradually. And so we're starting with, again, an area where there's not that much density, not much traffic. And we're also starting with not a much more simpler route concept. It's just a loop, a circular loop. And the idea is to learn from that, how to better manage the technology, what is it that we need to build it appropriately. And so again, there's been already some hiccups and we're learning from those, but that is the point of a pilot in a less dense area to kind of learn without causing too much impacts to the rest of those. And so it seems like I ran a little over time. My apologies for that, but thank you for your attention and here for your questions.
Great, thank you, Jean-Paul. So I see a bunch of hands that have come up. I'm gonna ask for members, since we are running a little bit out of time, that we each do one question a pop, and then we can circle back to second questions. So I saw member Levine's card up first, so we're gonna go that way. Oh yeah, actually, you're right. Thank you for that. I think we all got starstruck by APs. So let's do public comment first, for Mr. Mason.
Thank you. Back in February of 2016, there was a Google Lexus on El Camino Real that was in automatic mode, ran into a situation that then required an intervention by bottom line is there was a collision then and it occurred with a VTA bus. My basic question is, what funds are funding his time? MTA has got their staff lawyer on this project, on this problem? Where are the monies coming from and what expenditure account is funding it? Basically, the R&D costs are being offloaded on us. They should have gone to Black Rock City and created a San Francisco there and let them go do their R&D there. We are suffering for the R&D. That's no expense to them, so that means the program money that there's more profit at the bottom end. The public is paying for this oversight. The commuter buses require a fee for oversight, and we're providing oversight again here, so we ought to charge them an oversight fee. Bottom line is, big money talks at the state level, because everything has been programmed by the development of the corporations. Their direct intent is to only deal with one entity, and that's at the state level, and they don't want to deal with anybody, any other distractions. So bottom line is, we are paying for this directly and indirectly, and there's no oversight that's adequate, and we need to have control over this through a monetary process similar to the Google buses. We have to have them pay for what they are causing on us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. I think I saw Roland on the virtual.
Yes, Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you. And I have a very quick question to the chair. And the question is whether Tesla is on your radar screen, and if not, why not? And the reason I'm asking is that you've got to admit this, that Tesla is much more advanced than Cruise and Waymo. But currently, Tesla will not allow their vehicles to operate in UAV mode on public roads until they can prove that they are better drivers than humans. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Do we have any other public comment? Seeing none, let's open it up for members. So I'm going to try to take this in the best order that I saw it. We're going to go with member Levine first, then member Bars, then member Ortega, then Vice Chair Siegel, and then member Davidson, and then myself.
Yeah, I thank you so much for your presentation. I share probably everyone's concern here about the operations here. Apparently, these vehicles were supposed to be to look at ways to reduce accidents, and that was their primary purpose. And clearly, that's not happening. And at this point, it appears that we are powerless. We as the CAC, we as the city, and all we can do, it seems, is to find a way to lend our support to a growing number of entities that are that want some control over these commercial operations. And so I guess it would be good, I don't know if this is the place to do it, but to get a sense of this committee and whether we can go forward, if it is the sense of the committee, to support the control over or to stay, I guess, the commercial operations of these vehicles at this time. Secondly, the only other thing I wanted to say is that since we don't have any control, and it appears that as though the only agency that does have control is at the state level, it might be an item for our next legislative agenda from SFCTA to find a way to provide for more local control over these vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, member Levine. Member Bars.
Member Levine, you just put your mic back on.
Oh, did I have it off all at first?
I think it flipped off or something.
Sorry.
You're okay. Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. On the theme of finding some mechanism for more local oversight, have we explored a voluntary summit program that's like we have with the employer shuttles?
No, not yet. Like, I think that all of the options are on the table, but that concept, I guess the employers shall also work on access to the curb, right? Like, I think that's kind of the core concept. And so it's a tool that it's in the toolbox of SFMTA. But I guess, yeah, needs to be explored further.
Member Ortega.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation, and I do find the information that you presented to be somewhat unsettling, but there was several recent articles that were also posted, including one by Ars Technica that was posted recently, that discussed the comparison of AV safety to actual human drivers. Now, I believe AVs should be held to a higher standard, absolutely. They should be driving at a level that is much better than the average human driver. I also think that every incident that you showed us happens with everyone else in the city, and that it goes back to another concern that I have, and I think a lot of members of this board have, which is a lack of enforcement on a lot of these stuff for normal drivers. And personally, I'm kind of over AV being the scapegoat for the fact that there's just all of this bad driving in the city. And yeah, AVs need to be held to a higher standard. I 100% agree. The accidents should not happen. They should not be interfering with fire trucks. Very clear in this. But I do also think that when I saw pictures of them walking the bus lanes or them running through red lights and causing side swipes, that every other incident I've seen in the city has had a normal human driver. And that a lot of the data that I looked through with all of the incident reports for the AVs shows that in general, the AV accident was not actually caused by the AV. There are some that are, and those all need to be fixed. But a lot of the time, it was another driver that caused the AV accident, but because an AV is involved, it has to be reported as an AV accident. And I just would like to understand from the city's perspective, what are we going to do overall with the bad driving in general? The normal drivers, the Lyft drivers that are blocking the transit lanes, the anyone who's like just sitting in there. I've had it where a normal driver sat in front of the N train or the J train on the street and they couldn't get around it, and they're just running inside, getting some takeout, you know. I agree that AV enforcement needs to happen, but I also think it needs to happen at a macro level in the city, and I want that to be addressed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the only comment that I would add to this point is the notion that AVs, I had the figures in one of the slides, but basically, like, I think between the two companies, they completed somewhat in the neighborhood of 7 million driverless miles in their whole operations, whereas 1 day of BMT in San Francisco is about 8 to 9 million BMT. So the ability to actually make a statistically kind of sound argument with regards to the safety of these AVs vis-a-vis human drivers, we don't have the total, the amount of miles just yet, because again.
I'm sorry, you gave two figures, and I want to understand 8 million. 8 million, is that for everyone in the city?
Yes.
So, and then we're comparing that to, so what's the ratio then?
So that is the point, that to actually build a ratio that is statistically significant, we don't have, like, the denominator of the BMT from the AV providers is not yet to the level that one can make an actual argument. Like, you can make the division, but it doesn't compare to the numbers and the soundness of our kind of crash statistics. And so again, like I suppose that there's a lot of the companies do have an interest in kind of arguing that they're safer, and they can present kind of numbers to that end. But I think ultimately, like, the academic discussion, that they're shared, the arguments that I'm sharing.
Thank you, Member Ortega. Vice Chair Siegel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I was just wondering, I know you mentioned that, MTA and CTA obviously don't have regulatory power over AVs specifically. But SMTA does regulate the use of right-of-way in San Francisco. And I know that there are certain streets with certain kinds of vehicle restrictions currently, such as the weight restriction on Guerrero Street as an example. I was wondering, does MTA have levers like that they could use to restrict AVs from operating just on certain streets, or are they not allowed? Is like the weight thing is a very particular kind of thing we have power over? Because it does seem like it might be a benefit to restrict AVs, even if we can't prevent them from operating as shuttle services or taxi services in the city overall. If we could, while they are currently in flux and the data on the safety is not clear, if we could, for example, prevent them from running on streets with light rail tracks or within a block of a fire station or on particularly narrow streets where braking would completely block the flow of traffic. Like, is that an option for us?
Not seem to my knowledge, it doesn't seem to be an option at the moment. I do want to say that the point of kind of like laying all of the different kind of regulatory filings that we've done, it does kind of go to show that again, of the different efforts, that we've tried to shape this industry. And so I hear again the powerlessness that to some degree I conveyed as well. But I think that it's not like the effort is constant in terms of trying to figure out the most creative ways to I guess have an impact, and at the same time to build awareness of the issues so that maybe other folks that are engaged and might have kind of be in a position to help kind of build kind of sounder regulations to also kind of participate. But yeah, my understanding is that that's not on the table available to SFMTA.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. So I had a couple questions just really quickly in terms of, I know that we had, if we could pull up the slide really quickly about the different regulatory bodies real quick. I know there's a growing concern amongst the CAC and amongst other folks in the city, particularly around enforcement when it comes to, commuter buses and just overall lack of the ability to enforce moving vehicles in general in the city. And so I'm wondering, has there been any exploration, particularly about fines levied, particularly for interfering with emergency response? So in terms of like an AV, for example, blocking a fire truck or a mass shooting, since both of these situations have now happened in real time, about actually incurring a much steeper fine, particularly for, the fact is, one thing that wasn't mentioned on the slide was that like a person died, right? Because they weren't able to actually get the medical care that they needed to while they were in an emergency vehicle, right? So now human life has actually suffered as a result of this, right? Beyond just even like, dogs now, right? And the fact that you brought up the fact that we wouldn't have even caught the dog being killed if there wasn't an actual person in the vehicle, right? It's very, very concerning to me.
I missed your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I'm wondering if like there's been any exploration of fines, like extra imposed kind of fines and higher fines for interfering with emergency vehicles.
My understanding is that there's no vehicle to issue the fine, at least that is readily available. All of these incidents are of great concern to get the leadership in the city, and I don't think that there's been an approach to issue these fines that we're aware of. So again, maybe through a legislative process or other ways, kind of the ability to fine AV or AV providers would be available to the city, but I don't believe it is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the Teamsters have gotten creative with now trying to block all charging stations and any kind of application for that, at least on the planning level. I'm wondering if we can impose some sort of impact fees, particularly for any of those extra vehicles, right? And as a way of just, you know, if you're operating as an AV parking lot, that you're gonna get charged triple or quadruple, just to at least start putting pressure on some of the companies to start complying. For this, you know, and so that's something I think we might wanna look at least on the planning side. The other thing as well too is, in terms of, do we have a number in terms of like what it's gonna look like for a outlook of complete jobs losses for AVs? in the
No,
future?
I don't believe there's a study available for
Okay.
that assessment.
Okay, it'd be interesting to also explore that as well too, particularly going forward, right? Because we know that, you know, if these you know, autonomous vehicles are fully implemented to kind of, I worry about the corporate influence that, you know, especially when it comes to cutting costs. What that actual job loss is gonna be for the economic future. And I guess my third and final remarks would be on this is, where are our state and federal representatives, particularly publicly, like having a position on you know, the regulatory framework of AVs in the city? Do we have any of that? Like, I'd like to know where our state and local, besides, you know, Assemblymember Ting, who's been very vocal about this.
Yeah, but I think that like the letter from the chair of the Communications and Conveyance Committee, like it's signed by I believe another kind of 5 Bay Area kind of assembly members. So it's building, but yeah, I think it's more of a more recent event to see this interest.
Has the CTA reached out to Speaker Pelosi, Speaker Emeritus Pelosi's office in terms of discussing some of the concerns on the local level for that? Because I think that might also be an approach to, you know, reaching out to the Highway Transit Safety Administration as well too, for looking at a federal approach on this. So that would be my recommendations as well, because I think we need to, you know, we can only rely at times on the state so much, right? And so I think we need to also really look at this on like a federal level, or a very, very macro level. So those will be my comments. Do we have any other questions, comments from members? Seeing none. This is an informational item, so we can adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
You item?
Oh, new business. I'm sorry,
It's the easy way.
yes.
We're out now.
So real quick, so we're gonna move on. Thank you, Mr. Velez, for your presentation. So actually, let's jump on to introduction of new business. Do CBC members have any new business? Okay, I see Member Kim, and Vice Chair Siegel, Member Kim.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I heard before we talking about the parking meter, our extension. And then I heard the economic impact report might come sometime September. I'm not sure, but if true, and then maybe we can invite a person who, you know, the economic impact report, so we can discuss. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Siegel.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to just sort of formalize my request from the earlier item for an assessment of what the economic impact of making the 25 line free would be relative to the operating costs of the programs to, yeah. And then also just would be curious at the same time to know how the 25 compares to other lines as far as on-time performance and you know, runs missed, to Kevin's remarks about the reliability, given that this is such an important route for the island. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. I have one item as well too. I'd like to establish a subcommittee, and I promise it's my last one for a while. Particularly on AV, you know, like just really like kind of like analyzing AVs, kind of moving forward from there. But I'd like to see if there's 2 members that would like to join me on this.
I would join on that.
I could join.
Great, thank you both. And that being said, let's move on to item 12, which is going to be, oh, sorry, public comment, Sears.
I would recommend tomorrow night at the San Francisco MTA meeting at 5:30 for the Citizens Advisory Council. They're gonna have a presentation
Sorry,
on,
is this general public comment or public comment on? their
Right.
notes?
on new item, I mean, on new items.
Perfect,
yeah.
sorry.
Tomorrow night at 5:30 is going to be the second item on the agenda is a presentation on parking meters. And going to expanding the parking meter hours. So if there's any interest in that, you might want to tune in. That has grave impacts on residents that live in areas that have parking meters because they're going to be feeding the meter until they go to bed at night type thing is what the project is. So just want to provide that as information for you so you can participate. If necessary. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have Roland on for public comment?
No.
Great, so
He may be general public comment.
Yeah. Roland, okay. Roland is on here for public comment, so. Please unmute yourself, Roland. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we on general public comment?
Not yet.
about to be.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay,
Great, so let's move on to item number 12, which is general public comment. And so I'm gonna hand it over to Mr. Mason, who's in the room.
Yeah, okay, I am providing you with, the commuter bus violations. And these are only a snapshot. Keep in mind that that might be a violation at 24th and Church or 24th and Dolores or Valencia Street. But keep in mind that those buses, there's a segment of buses that come from Divisadero and California. And then they make stops at Gary and Haight and down into the Castro and then over the hill and finally get there. And then after they depart from 24th and Church, then they continue on to either Valencia Street or Valley in San Jose, Glen Park Station, and then they finally depart. So keep in mind that when I report one violation, there's really a string of violations that go back to up the street and also out to the Valley to Haight-Ashbury. So there's enforcement, I'm going back and reading the old documents from 2015 and 16, and I'm looking at that and I'm saying, that's really, there's been a lot of evolution. You've had COVID now, and the occupancy of the buses is not to be in line with what I perceived the reports that were done back in 2015, 16 and all. So it's really Apple and Genentech, yes, okay, they do have ridership Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Genentech Monday and Tuesday, Wednesdays, Monday and Friday also. So keep in mind that this program, it was supposed to be a net to save on pollution, and my position is, from my observations, they're a net generator of pollution now because a lot of these buses are empty, but they're still paying them. And of course, with that, we're paying the cost of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Let's move over to Roland.
we're doing virtual
Thank you.
comment. Oh, go ahead, Roland.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is to give you a heads up on a couple of letters I'm working on and that I will be copying the CAC on. The first one is about these so-called B moves, Caltrain B moves, and then what's going on with high-speed rail. Now, the B move, I'm going to debunk this business because what they're actually working on is not an EMU at all. What it is 3 totally unpowered cars and a locomotive. It's actually a loco disguised as a Caltrain cab car without any seats, doors, or windows. This prototype costs 10 times as much as a battery electric locomotive and will not be available until 28 at the earliest. The other thing I'm working on is what's happening with the high-speed rail procurement, which is causing these problems that Edward Mason mentioned earlier about this retrofit for level boarding and yada, yada, yada. The issue there is that these people have actually ignored a 2017 recommendation by the high-speed rail peer review group to consider bi-level trains, like what Caltrain are using, compatible with Caltrain, Amtrak, and Metrolink. These trains that they're basically pushing aside have been tested back in 2007 at 358 miles an hour. They still hold the world record. The $23 million per train set, which is half the cost of a Caltrain EMU, 20% lower energy costs, 20% less operating costs, and they're basically getting pushed aside by the authority. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other further public comment?
No further public comment.
Perfect. So we're gonna move on to item number 3, which is adjourned. This meeting is adjourned. The next meeting, CAC meeting is on September 27th, 2023. Have a great evening.